The painting begins with Prometheus telling the story of Zeus, the king of the gods. Zeus starts his day by addressing the mortals, hoping they still revere him as before. Although Prometheus is sure of Zeus's corruption and plans to overthrow him, for which he will need the help of three people. The first is Eurydice, or simply Riddy, who lives on Crete and is dissatisfied with her life. One day, a woman approaches her outside a store, and from her muttering, it becomes clear that this is Cassandra. She laments the disbelief in her prophecies and predicts that everything will change for Riddy by the end of the day. Meanwhile, on Olympus, Zeus notices something wrong with the divine spring meander. His wife Hera assures him that everything is fine. Zeus then recalls his son, Dionysus. At this moment, Dionysus is partying in a club on Earth, but later roams the city, where a food vendor suggests he gift his father a watch as a symbol of time. Dionysus decides to visit his father, despite Hera's displeasure, as his mother, whom Hera angrily turned into a bee, was mortal, and Dionysus only became a god due to his father's whim. Zeus is watching a ceremony unveiling his statue on Crete, where one of the women sacrifices herself in the name of the gods. When Dionysus gives him the watch, Zeus doesn't show much enthusiasm, as he already has a watch from Heracles, considered a lucky charm. Nevertheless, Zeus tries on the gift, but ignores his son's pleas for a more responsible role in governing the world. Irritated by Hera's rude comments, Dionysus steals Heracles' watch and leaves. Zeus is engrossed in the statue unveiling, but when the veil falls, it turns out the statue is destroyed and covered in feces, with the words, "To hell with the gods," written on it. Minos, the president of Crete, screams in rage, and Zeus vows revenge, despite Hera suggesting that Poseidon deal with the matter. Meanwhile, Riddy returns home, where Orpheus, playing the guitar, informs her that he plans to start tonight's concert at the palace with a new song named after her. Riddy dislikes the idea, feeling that he is already making their relationship public against her will. But for now, she doesn't have the strength to protest. Later, Orpheus's manager takes him to Heraklion. On Olympus, Zeus is furious at what he saw and suddenly notices a wrinkle on his forehead. He immediately teleports Prometheus, who assures the king of the gods that he cannot be destroyed. But back on his rock, Prometheus laughs at Zeus's foolishness. Meanwhile, Dionysus gets new advice from the vendor, to find his own purpose instead of living for his father's approval. In Heraklion, Orpheus is preparing for the performance, confident that Eurydice will arrive soon. But Riddy visits Hera's temple to speak with Hera's mute servant, Tacita, who is also her mother. Meanwhile, Orpheus starts his show with a song explaining that Eurydice is the love of his life, while in the temple, Riddy confesses that she no longer loves him. Her mother cut off her tongue and abandoned her for Hera's service. However, the gods don't concern her, and she doesn't believe in prophecies. The crowd enjoys Orpheus's singing when Dionysus teleports to Heraklion to listen to him. On her way from the temple, Riddy sees Cassandra again, stops in the middle of the street, and gets hit by a truck. Meanwhile, Tacita reveals Riddy's prophecy, showing that it coincides with Zeus's prophecy, though Prometheus insists there can't be two identical prophecies. Orpheus learns of his beloved's death as Cassandra and Tacita watch her body being taken away. Sometime later, Dionysus attends the funeral and sees a grief-stricken Orpheus give the priest a coin for Eurydice to be placed in her mouth so she can pay for passage to the afterlife. Dionysus realizes that this is his purpose, to help Orpheus. Orpheus, however, gets drunk, buys a gun, and heads to the beach, intending to take his own life. But he accidentally shoots Dionysus. Orpheus panics, but Dionysus shows that he is a god and immune to wounds. Prometheus's voice reminds that Zeus wasn't always a god, meaning he can be destroyed by mortals. Meanwhile, Riddy finds herself on a ferry in a black and white underworld. 10 years ago, the Amazon queen found and killed Caeneus, who had escaped from the tribe. As he died, he saw his mother, Marina, among the killers. In the present, Orpheus wakes up after a wild night with Dionysus and hears his assurances that he can bring Riddy back. At the same time, she is sailing down the river Styx in the underworld, watching an introductory video from Hades and Persephone about the frame through which one must swim to be reborn. Later, the guardians of the underworld are summoned by Zeus in order to increase the number of swimmers escorting souls through the frame. Meanwhile, Dionysus demonstrates his power to Orpheus by driving wildly. Riddy's ferry docks and passengers are met by handlers with Cerberus dogs. One of the dogs barks at Riddy, and its handler, Caeneus, pulls her out of the main line. For the past 10 years, he has been in this liminal world, certain he will remain a guide. However, Medusa announces his transfer to the ranks of the swimmers, though he didn't ask for this, as he's waiting for his mother. His partner Priou is happy about it, especially as Medusa shows her one of her snakes, harmless now that they're dead. Meanwhile, Dionysus takes Orpheus to a bar called The Cave, where one can get a chance to enter the underworld. At the same time, Zeus descends to Earth and, wandering through the city, marvels at how contented and cheerful people appear. He summons Prometheus and confesses his fear that his power is weakening. He believes things must return to the old ways, where people trembled before him. To do this, he plans to destroy half the world. Prometheus advises him not to. Meanwhile, Riti finds out she was buried without a coin, which means she cannot pass through the frame and renew herself. She will now remain in the underworld, working for 200 years before she finally has a chance to cross Lethe. At the same time, Orpheus learns that the jury, consisting of the Moirai, the Fates, will evaluate the performances of those seeking to bring a loved one back to Earth. In the first round, people must mark all the distinctive features, scars, and birthmarks of their loved ones on a mannequin. Meanwhile, Medusa takes the new divers to the river Lethe, where the glowing frame awaits. They must help people swim to it and reach rebirth. Back in the cave, Orpheus faces off against a couple grieving their child. The inconsolable parents perform a poignant pantomime about their love for their son. Orpheus feels he cannot do better. He is asked to sing about his beloved, but without a voice. He sits down at the instrument. At the same time, Riti reaches the river, but cannot even immerse herself in Lethe without her coin. Orpheus finishes playing and receives applause, but fate punishes him by stabbing his hand with a knife, revealing that he took his wife's coin, depriving Riti of the chance to renew herself. Orpheus admits he did it out of love, but the audience, including Dionysus, is repulsed by his selfishness. Thus, the grieving parents, Anatole and Clara, win the competition and gain access to the underworld. By the river, Caeneus catches up with Riti and confesses that he too was buried without a coin, which his mother took. Meanwhile, Dionysus begs the Fates to let Orpheus into the underworld. They agree in exchange for Zeus's watch. Zeus, meanwhile, shares with Prometheus his plan to tell the mortals stories in the style of the Trojan War to make them hate each other. Then a great conflict will begin, but Prometheus reminds Zeus of his missing watch, which was his lucky charm. Zeus decides to find the watch first. Dionysus at this time gives it to the Fates. On Earth, the Furies have long roamed, dispensing justice. They are invisible to the innocent, and only the doomed can see them. Today, they force an unpunished criminal to take his own life in the restroom of a roadside cafe, then move on to their next target. That target is a woman named Ari, who accidentally strangled her twin brother in her sleep. Their mother never accepted his death, and now Master Daedalus creates a sculpture of Glaucus each year, representing how he would have looked on his birthday. Ari's father, President Minos, promises to give his daughter anything she wants, even though she refuses a gift every year. Her bodyguard Theseus overhears. During the day, the president and his family gather for the Olympiad celebrations on Crete. There, they witness the desecrated statue of the gods, in which Theseus played a part. Minos is enraged, his wife hysterical, and Ari helps her mother back to her room. Meanwhile, on Olympus, Zeus, suspecting that one of the servants is responsible for the missing watch, begins killing them one by one. Hera shares this with Poseidon, explaining that Zeus is planning 2 phases of humanity's destruction and asks the god of the oceans to find the ill-fated watch. Prometheus, on the other hand, remembers that he once killed Charon in bed, but not before extracting a promise from him to help whoever would come to him in the future with a mark. Meanwhile, the Fates, having received Zeus's watch, allow Orpheus to pass into the underworld through a garbage container. Orpheus joins Anatole, who is searching for his son. The 2 men enter a black and white world. Anatole reluctantly speaks with Orpheus, as the latter committed an unforgivable act by taking his wife's coin. But Orpheus justifies his action with love. The man agrees to travel together. At the same time, Caeneus visits his dog, Photis, releases him from his cage, and the dog runs off. Meanwhile, Hades and Persephone discover that one soul is missing. They discuss how it managed to escape from the underworld. Persephone fears this may be the beginning of something terrible. Hades asks her not to inform Zeus about it just yet. Meanwhile, during his search for Photis, Caeneus runs into Nax, who begs for help and informs him that he has already swum through the frame. But then someone calls out to Caeneus and Nax disappears. Later, during dinner, Riti joins Caeneus and Priu, announcing that she has been appointed as a swimmer. The girl doesn't understand why they continue to eat, sleep, and wash when they were already dead. They explain that it helps them feel normal. Later, Priu invites everyone to a party for the new swimmers. On Earth, Poseidon summons Dionysus to an aquarium and accuses him of stealing Zeus's watch. Dionysus admits that he brought a mortal into the underworld, and that mortal will be the first to bring someone back from the realm of the dead. Poseidon warns him that if this happens, Zeus will destroy them all. He orders Dionysus to return the watch. Meanwhile, in the underworld, Orpheus and Anatole prepare to cross the river Styx when Charon approaches and reluctantly agrees to ferry them across. At the same time, Canius encounters his killer, Hippolyta II, on the shore. In fear, he turns away from her, but she calls him a blasphemer and tells him that his mother voluntarily gave him up. Dionysus finds an exact copy of Zeus's watch in a store and heads to Mount Olympus. Zeus doesn't notice the substitution. In the underworld, Canius is tormented by the realization of his mother's betrayal, which he had worried about for so long. Suddenly, Charon stops the boat and shows the men Scylla, which means only one of them can proceed further. Now only a fight will determine who it will be. Orpheus attacks Anatole. At this moment, Canius confesses to Rhyti that he used to be an Amazon, meaning he was born a girl, but later he was cast out. Suddenly, they hear Nax calling for help. Meanwhile, Anatole nearly overpowers Orpheus, but Charon intervenes upon seeing the fate's mark on the musician's hand. He throws Anatole overboard and he disappears into Scylla's maw. Meanwhile, Zeus shares his plans for vengeance on humanity with Dionysus. They then both descend to Earth, where Zeus thanks his son for returning the watch. He hopes for Dionysus's help in terrifying humans with natural disasters and conflicts. Dionysus doesn't like this idea, but Zeus reminds him that humans don't matter. At this time, Hades receives a message that they are soon expecting an influx of new souls. Immediately after, he is informed that the missing soul has been found. Charon and Orpheus arrive on the shore, where a message of gratitude from Prometheus is written. Rhyti and Canius observe as Nax is cornered in some dungeon. They carefully follow and discover the empty shells of all the souls that have passed through the frame, even those they sent through it earlier that morning. Now comes the moment when Prometheus can explain everything. It turns out that Zeus punished him for standing against him. Before his imprisonment, Prometheus was visited by the Lady of the Fates. She demanded that the hero kill the one person who trusted him without question, Charon. Moreover, he needed to gain Zeus's trust by submitting to his punishment and accepting his fate. Prometheus carried out everything, and it worked. Meanwhile, the Furies have isolated Ari in a hotel where she explains that she didn't want to kill her brother. However, the Furies didn't come to punish her, but to show her the truth. Poseidon came to her father and reminded him of the prophecy that he would die at the hands of his firstborn. Ari refuses to accept this truth, even when she sees Minos handing the baby to Daedalus, ordering him to kill the child. The girl doesn't believe it, even when the Furies remind her of the Trojan massacre. She returns to the palace but remains silent about everything she has learned. Minos is happy that she is safe, but Ari now questions everything her father tells her. That night, she goes to Daedalus, who is forced to admit that despite her father's order, he didn't kill Glaucus, and the boy is still being held in the dungeon. However, he has long since lost his human form, having turned into the Minotaur. Meanwhile, Zeus and Dionysus watch the news, which reports various natural disasters, much to the gods' delight. Later, Zeus heads to Hera's bathroom, where she keeps the tongues and prayers of her worshippers. He accidentally overhears her cheating on him. In search of the truth, he tortures one of her Tasitas, but she refuses to betray Hera and dies. Discovering this, the goddess asks to be shown the tongue from which he learned of her infidelity, but Zeus cannot find it among the millions of others and falls for her assurances that she isn't plotting anything against him. Calming Zeus and leaving him in bed, Hera mourns the death of her loyal Tasita. Meanwhile, Rhyti and Canius continue their search for Nax, but see that he has already been found by Hades, who personally removes Nax's soul. For some reason, this causes Rhyti great pain and forces the pair to return to the surface, where they are spotted by Medusa. Rhyti doesn't understand why Canius feels nothing and says goodbye to him. Orpheus regains consciousness on a deserted shore. At the same time, Dionysus enters a cave and learns that Orpheus has successfully crossed the Styx. Charon denies Orpheus a drink of water and reminds him that ahead lies the final trial, which he must face alone. Rhyti, still reeling from what Hades did to Nax, goes to Canius and reveals that her mother became Tasita when she was 5 years old. Rhyti never accepted this and cursed the gods every night. Perhaps that's why it hurt her so much. Canius then tells his story. In their tribe, boys who reach adulthood must leave the Amazon territory forever under the threat of execution. Canius' best friend also left, but soon returned, confessing that he wanted to ask for readmittance to the tribe. Canius reminded him of the danger and asked him to leave. That same day, Canius saw the boy killed. That night, his mother confessed that she had long known about his rebirth since her prophecy had immediately predicted the birth of a boy, which is why she was so happy when a girl was born. But alas, you cannot deceive the gods. So Canius hates the gods too. Realizing that they feel the same, the girl kisses him. Meanwhile, Orpheus continues walking through the wasteland, suffering from thirst and heat. Persephone urges Hades to tell Zeus the truth, as the transition world cannot hold so many souls, which may cause a breakdown. Zeus meets with Prometheus again. He realizes that the problem is not with mortals and decides to destroy the Fates, who are the source of his prophecy. But Prometheus warns Zeus that he may destroy the entire world, including himself, and gives the example of Minos, who lives in defiance of his prophecy. However, Zeus reminds him that Glaucus can escape and kill Minos at any moment. He then suggests that if the father kills the son, it will refute the prophecy and create a contender. Meanwhile, Rhyti and Caeneus discover that they share the same prophecy. Rhyti recalls her encounter with Cassandra and realizes that the talks of the rebirth of those who have passed through the frame are lies. People devote their lives to the gods, hoping for a better life, but in reality, their souls turn into Meander's water, which the gods drink to stay immortal. At the same time, Hades and Persephone arrive at Zeus's and publicly announce the instability of the transition world, which is about to lead to disaster. If souls stop returning to Earth, they will run out. In a rage, Zeus pushes Hades into a pool and strikes him with lightning. Meanwhile, Orpheus struggles to make his way through the scorching desert. He begins hallucinating and eats sand, mistaking it for water. Persephone discovers that Hades is alive and vows to destroy Zeus. Zeus orders Poseidon to make Minos kill his son. The god of the ocean goes to the Fates, and they say that sometimes a person can defy prophecies. Hera asks her husband not to be like his father, Cronus. It turns out that he was a real tyrant, and when Zeus grew tired of enduring it, he killed his father, though he never understood how he managed to do it. That's when the frame was created, which collected souls instead of rebirthing them. Poseidon and Hera order Minos to kill his son, and if he refuses, Ari will be subjected to torture. Meanwhile, Orpheus encounters a man near a water cooler. The man offers him water, but if Orpheus drinks, he will not be able to bring his wife back. Despite dehydration and near death, Orpheus chooses not to drink the water, which turns out to be the final trial. After passing it, he sees a door appear, leading him to the city. The first thing the man does is rush to a water faucet, where Prue and her partner, upon learning that he is Rhiti's husband, volunteer to take him to her. While Orpheus embraces her in front of Caeneus, she doesn't know how to tell him the truth about her feelings. On Earth, learning that Orpheus has passed all the trials, Dionysus turns to Poseidon for advice but catches him in a compromising situation with Hera. Meanwhile, Medusa informs Charon that the man with the mark has arrived in the underworld, which means Prometheus was telling the truth. Marina, stepping out of her trailer, sees Rhiti's mother holding a sign that says, "Today is the day." The woman silently walks to a pre-dug grave, lies in it, puts a coin in her mouth, and pulls the trigger of a gun. At this time, Orpheus apologizes to Rhiti for taking her coin and preventing her from being renewed, but he did it in the name of love, and now he has come to bring her back to life. However, Rhiti doesn't want to return to him. It's time for a conversation with Hades, but first, Medusa tells Rhiti that they have been waiting for her, hoping for a change of power. Meanwhile, Zeus holds a family dinner while watching Minos kill his son. Daedalus explains to Ari how Glaucus became the Minotaur. The boy spent all day in the dark, constantly alone. The guards weren't allowed to talk to him, and eventually, he went mad and became more of a beast than a child. He started attacking the jailers, which gave Minos the idea to turn his son into a kind of weapon. Daedalus made him a mask and horns, and now criminals were fed to him. However, he treats Daedalus more gently than others. Hearing this, Ari demands to be taken to her brother. Meanwhile, Caeneus tries to convince Rhiti to leave with Orpheus and reveal the truth about the underworld to people, while Medusa leads Orpheus to Hades, who refuses to let the couple return to Earth, even despite his willingness to replace his wife and stay there instead of her. Medusa is very disappointed with the outcome. Persephone expresses her disapproval, as returning a dead man to life could not have been ignored by Zeus. However, Hades claims that some things must remain sacred and that he will find a way to restore the souls. Convinced of her righteousness, Persephone acts behind Hades' back to send Rhiti and Orpheus back to Earth. Meanwhile, Daedalus escorts Ari into the Minotaur's dungeon. However, Minos is just releasing Glaucus from his cell to kill him with Hera's knife. Realizing this, Daedalus tries to lead Ari back, but Glaucus attacks and kills him while the woman tries to escape. Minos descends into the labyrinth as Ari is cornered by Glaucus. The girl talks to him, and the beast refuses to attack her. Ari removes his mask, horrified by what her father has done to his son. At this moment, Minos appears, and after a short fight, he kills Glaucus, to the great delight of Zeus and the other gods. Meanwhile, Medusa tells Rhiti that the basement of the underworld is called Nothingness, and although she doesn't know exactly what is done to the souls there, Rhiti can stop it by revealing everything to people. She leads Rhiti to Persephone, where Orpheus is already waiting for her. At the same time, Minos explains to his daughter that he did everything to protect the family, but it's at this point that Eri realizes her father misinterpreted the prophecy. While Glaucus was born first, he didn't breathe, but Eri cried out immediately. Explaining this to her father, she kills Minos with the same blade he used to kill her brother. Zeus faints in shock. Later, he wakes up and realizes that Minos is dead, that his prophecy has come true, and that he must stop his own prophecy before it's too late. Meanwhile, Persephone discovers Hades is missing. Hera demands their presence on Olympus. Hades, meanwhile, tells Medusa about his plan to restore the underworld. On Earth, Zeus goes to the Moirais cave, where they explain that for his prophecy to come true, he must believe in it. Nevertheless, Zeus intends to kill them. The Moirai not only accept their fate, but they help Zeus kill them, dousing themselves in flammable liquid while Zeus strikes a match. Before their death, they return Zeus's watch, confessing that they had received it from Dionysus. The cave burns to the ground, leaving Prometheus in shock. Meanwhile, before returning to Earth, Rhyti confesses to Orpheus that she has fallen in love with Cineas. She explains that the coin had nothing to do with it. She was already planning to leave him because she was unhappy, and then she died. Nevertheless, they still have a chance to start over, and so they continue their journey. Cineas rushes to the frame to try to stop anyone else from crossing the border and suddenly sees his mother. At the same time, Hades enters nothingness and attempts to restore Naxos' soul, but to no avail. Cineas accuses Marina of betrayal, but she insists that she only brought the Amazons to him to fulfill his prophecy. She had waited 10 years and had now come to guide him through the frame. Cineas reveals that the gods lied to them and that no one returns to Earth. However, Marina enters Lethe. Cineas dives after her and suddenly begins to sink into the water. He catches up with his mother and they both disappear into the frame. Prometheus does not understand what is happening as the prophecy is not being fulfilled and he still does not gain his freedom. Meanwhile, Zeus returns home and distributes bottles of water from Meander to his family. Dionysus' bottle is only half full, and Persephone receives none at all, as Meander's consumption will now depend on their obedience. He also announces that he has destroyed the Fates, and therefore all prophecies. Dionysus is forced to admit that he gave the watch to the Fates so a mortal could return his wife from the dead. However, Persephone contradicts this, revealing that Orpheus has died. As punishment for disobedience, Zeus kills Dionysus' beloved kitten. He also burns Hera's bees, declaring that she will no longer keep the mother of his children in servitude. Suddenly, Poseidon confesses that he loves Hera and asks her to come away with him, but she laughs at him. Nevertheless, Zeus pours out Poseidon's water and banishes him. Zeus then declares that he will now rule not only Crete, but also the underworld and everything else. He goes to Prometheus to discuss what has happened, but as soon as Prometheus explains that he has never betrayed Zeus, he suddenly disappears. Meanwhile, Ari drags Glaucus' body to the palace and tells the whole truth. Her mother, crying over her son, approves of her actions. Rhyti and Orpheus manage to return to Earth. To Orpheus' surprise, the cave has disappeared, but his car remains. He offers to drive Rhyti to the city, but she refuses. Orpheus apologizes for keeping her coin, but she thanks him for returning her life and hugs him goodbye. Near Heraklion, Rhyti encounters Cassandra, who tells her that she has now become a prophet as well. She instructs Rhyti to find Ari and free the living, while Cineas will do the same with the dead. Meanwhile, in nothingness, Cineas' soul restores itself. He wakes up next to his mother, who opens her eyes with the word chaos on her lips. Prometheus finds himself on Olympus, where he is awaited by the invisible Fates, who explain that they cannot be killed, and that, according to the prophecy, he is now granted freedom. Zeus finds Prometheus on his throne. Try as he might, he cannot send him back to the rock. What's more, he suddenly notices a cut on his hand despite the fact that gods do not bleed. Meander stops flowing, which means that Zeus is no longer a god. Hera calls someone from a payphone, ordering them to assemble a team and prepare a free bed, and sets off on her journey with her Tacitus. Hades asks how it is possible that Cineas can restore human souls. Prometheus warns Zeus of the approaching chaos. Ari meets with Andromache to discuss the restoration of Troy and the destruction of Olympus. Dionysus gazes at his half-full bottle. Chaos is the best show of August, especially for those who are fascinated by Greek mythology. It's an unconventional and vibrant reimagining of ancient Greek myths, where the heroes of ancient legends are transported to the modern world. The finale leaves a sense of incompleteness, allowing hope for a continuation.